वासुदेवाय। ॐ भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाखया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्ति। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरुः श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगना रघुनाथं वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सहगना ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितश्च। हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिकान्त राधा कान्त नमोस्तुते। तप्त काञ्चन गौराङ्ग राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरि वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरि। वञ्चाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासदि गौरभक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे। कम करोति वाचालं पंगुन्नंगायते गिरिं यत्कृपः तमः श्रीगुरु दीनतारिणं परमानन्दमाधवं श्रीचैतन्य ईश्वरम्। Hare Krishna. So we'd like to welcome you all again for today's weekly discussion, Bhakti Vaibhav overview class. We are on the 6th canto, 5th chapter. So in the previous discussion, we have seen the prayers by Daksha, which are also Hamsagriya prayers. So in the end, we saw that Daksha, with his austerities, expertise, is able to please Lord Vishnu, and Lord Vishnu gives darshan to him. But it is coincidental, where Daksha wants to progenate, he's exploited it, and Lord's plan or the whole process of creation needs that kind of facilitation. But his heart is still not fully cleansed. We still have traces of impurities relating to his having offended Lord Shiva previously. So therefore Acharya has pointed, as we discussed in the previous session, that he was given unlimited opportunities for enjoyment. And the comparison was done with Kardama Muni, who also desired a wife, but he was given limited enjoyment and path for perfection was opened. So now we will see the Acharyas point out in this chapter, which is entitled How Daksha Curses Narad Muni, the traces of impurities, the traces of his offense to Lord Shiva, which comes out again in the form of he getting upset and cursing Srila Narad Muni, is seen, and that shows that he was not fully cleansed. So this particular chapter, we will see there are two sets of sons which Daksha progenites for. Basically, his wife's name is Panchajani, and from her she first has Haryashvas and then Shavalasvas. Hariyashvas are 10,000 in number and Shavalasvas are 1,000 in number. So you'll see how the thing proceeds. So this particular chapter, first 9 verses, Narad Muni tells the allegory to Hariyashvas, and then from 10th verse till 22nd verse, Hariyashva's understanding of Narad's allegory and their renunciation. After understanding the real purpose, and then 23 to 35, Shavalasvas follow the path of. So there's another set of sons which Daksha has. They are known as Shavalashvas, and they also follow the path of Hariyashvas. That is mentioned in the next part, and then 36 to 44, the end of the chapter, Daksha curses Narad Muni. So this is how, in brief, the overview of this chapter. Now we'll go section by section. The first section is Narada tells allegory to Hariyashvas. So who are they? That is mentioned from the first verse onwards. Shri Shuka Vacha Tasyam Sa Panchajanyam Ve Vishnu Mayupa Brahmita Hariyashva Samagan Ayutam Putran Ajanayad Vib. So it's mentioned that Daksha begets these 10,000 sons who are called, all combined together, they are known as Harayashvas. And they were impelled by Vishnu Maya. It's mentioned here. Vishnu Maya Upabrahmita. They were impelled, or they were under the illusory energy of them. Then further it's mentioned that how these Harayashvas, having been begotten, they are instructed by their father Daksha to beget children further, to progenate this whole universe creation. So therefore here it's mentioned that Daksha ordered them to beget children, and it's also mentioned what is the behavior of Daksha, or what is the behavior of these children. So it's mentioned that he was a very dharmic person, Daksha. So he wants them to beget children, but he wants them to have good culture also. So he says, before you beget children, you go and perform austerities. And understanding the mood of father, the gentle, submissive children of Daksha, they go in the west direction to form austerities, tapasya, for begetting, children or continuing the progeny. In the third verse, it's mentioned that they went to Narayana Saras, where Sindhu meets the sea, and there are many great sages who live in this place. So this is the place where they decide to perform their austerities. Then fourth and fifth verse mentions that what were their austerities. So they would bathe regularly in holy lakes, and therefore they became purified. And they were now in pure consciousness, the Paramhamsa. So they were inclined towards Paramhamsa activities. But still, to abide by the order of their father, they performed austerities. But seeing, Narad Muni saw this situation. He saw that they are actually purified and they are suitable for Paramhamsa life. So why they should be engaged in these fruitive mentalities? So seeing this situation, Narada approached these Hareshwars. So that is mentioned. So when Narad Muni approached, it's mentioned from 6th to 8th verse, he presents an allegory to them, seeing that they are actually very, very intelligent and very, very pure at heart. So Narad Muni, in an allegorical way, gives them an understanding of this material world and what should be their destination or their desired move. So in the allegory, there are few things. So first thing it's mentioned by Narad Muni is there's a kingdom with one male. His wife is unchaste and adores various attractive dresses. Third, there is a hole of no return. Fourth, a river is flowing in two directions. Generally, in this world, we see river flows in one direction, but there is a river which flows in two directions. Home of 25 elements. Swan is there, and automatically revolving object made of sharp razors and thunderbolts. So Narad Muni says, you have not seen all these, then how will you progenate? So this is how he tries to entice them to think deeply about the nature of this world. So Prabhupada in the purport he's saying that Narad Muni asked them to consider why they should follow their father's order to be entangled in family life. Indirectly, he asked them to find within the cores of their hearts the situation of the super soul, Lord Vishnu, for then they would truly be experienced. So Narad Muni, being a very compassionate uh, Vaishnava, he wants why somebody who is already purified, pure at heart, should get entangled in pravritti marg. They should actually work towards disentanglement. So therefore, he is trying to guide them in that direction. Prabhupada further says that, in other words, one who is too involved in his material environment and does not look within the core of his heart is increasingly entangled in this illusionary energy. So therefore, one who is looking for spiritual emancipation, spiritual growth, he has to look within. And that's what the spiritual scriptures teach us. Don't try to find happiness outside, but within. Within means in your spiritual experience. As a spirit soul, find that happiness within. Within the spiritual experience or the relationship of a jiva with the Supreme Lord. So Prabhupada is also quoting, even Prahlad Maharaj told his father Hiranyakashipu, Tatsadhumanye asurvarya dehinam sada samudvigna diyam asatgraha hitvatmapatam grahamandakupam vanam gatoyad harimashrayeta. That don't get entangled in this temporary body or the material affairs, and give up and take shelter of Lord and Vrindavan. So, in the same mood, Narad Muni is giving instructions to Hareshwas. In the ninth verse, Narad Muni tells, your father is omniscient. Without knowing his actual purpose, how will you create progeny? So, Narad Muni is telling, actually, your father is very clever, he's omniscient. So, you should understand his real mood. Basically, giving them an impetus to not just be satisfied with the external order which he is given, but go deep and see what is the purpose of that order. And there you will find real direction. So then, hearing this analogy from 10 to 22, Hareshwas being very intelligent, very pure at heart, being guided by the super soul, they start thinking about what Narad Muni has spoken, and then with proper spiritual deliberation, they are able to understand what are the different things which Narad Muni is trying to point out. So first thing is, in the 11th verse is mentioned about the word bhu was used, earth, field of activities. So Hareshwas understood that material body which caused bondage by false designation. Without cessation of bondage, there is no benefit of one's action. So this bhu, this field of activity, is this material body. And because of this false designation, it causes bondage. And unless one gives up this bondage, there is no benefit to one's action. So that is how they understood this who, earth, or the field of activity. So Prabhupada is pointing out this is very important. In this world, everyone is governed by this bodily consciousness and is striving very hard to achieve or to attain sense gratification for the bodily senses. And they're working very hard, especially in human form of life. But what Lord Rishabdev is telling Prabhupada says is that such activity is not at all good, since it engages the soul again and again in a body subjected to 3-4 miseries of the material conditions. So Prabhupada is warning in the last paragraph that Maya is very strong and she is very expert in putting impediments in the way of this understanding. What understanding? To get disentangled. And therefore, even after coming to Krishna consciousness, one may get allured, illusioned to continue one's material activities or material perfection. Then in the 12th verse, Hareshwas, because Narad Muni had mentioned, there's a king in this bhu. So there's only one male. So the Hareshwas understood who is that only enjoyer or one male is the Supreme Lord. And what is human's duty is to understand this fact, understand him. If one simply works hard, there is no benefit of one's action. So one may say, oh, I'm working very hard and I'll get success, perfection. But no, without understanding that Lord Hari, Krishna, he is the only enjoyer, he is the only king, one will not achieve perfection. So Narad Muni, so Prabhupada also is mentioning that aspect that one that aspect is mentioned as Turiya, who is beyond this material manifestation. Lord is described as. And if one is engaged in the activities in this material world, it's bhutva bhutva praliyate. Again and again, he must be born and destroyed. It's a never-ending cycle. Then, the third thing which was talked about was there is a whole of no return. So, there are two understanding to that. The spiritual world or the Patala Loka. So if such place exists, what is use of jumping like monkeys in this material world? So if one goes to spiritual world, it's like a hole with no return. Why? Because one has entered the spiritual atmosphere. Or if one goes down in Patala Loka, one gets too much entangled in sinful proclivities, tendencies. It is as if it is infinitely binding. So if one understands that there is a place, spiritual place where one can go and there will be no return, then what is the point of jumping like a monkey in this world, looking for miserable satisfaction in this world? So that is the understanding they have in from this analogy. So Prabhupada is giving that understanding, yat gatva nanivartante tad dhamam paramam mama janma karma cha me devyam, etc., etc. That if one understands this fact that there is a spiritual place which is eternal in nature, which relieves one of this entanglement, then he can be freed from this. And one thing we'll notice, Prabhupada is also pointing out that at the end of all these verses, the Hariyashwas are mentioning Kim Asat Karma Bhir Bhavet. So after understanding what the analogy is speaking about, they are saying Kim Asat Karma Bhir Bhavet. If this is the proper mood or this is the proper understanding, Kim Asat, then what is the profit in working towards temporary Asat Karma Bhir, Asat Karma Bhir? Those kind of activities which are temporary in nature. What can one gain? Kim asat karma bhir bhavet. What will one gain? What will be of one's benefit? So that's what they are again. So every every verse at the last line, this Kim Asit Karma Bhir Bhavet, they are mentioning. Then the next part of the energy was there is a prostitute who is unchaste and who takes on different uh, garments or different kinds of uh, uh, you know out uh, outlook. So Haryashwas understood this prostitute is like unsteady intelligence of a living entity that changes dress to attract attention. If one does not understand how they happen and what is the use of engaging in fruitive activities. So again, this intelligence is like a prostitute and it takes on different dresses just to allure that now, oh, now you'll get enjoyment, now you'll get enjoyment. So in various ways, like a prostitute, it's trying to allure the living entity from the right dharmic direction into undharmic activities and getting him entangled and feeling that, oh, now this will be able to give me some solace, some happiness. So Prabhupada is pointing out to the current society how this prostitution or this aspect of um, attracting opposite sex is actually harming um, the spiritual emancipation which a human birth is supposed to be for. And for a devotee, he should not be attracted by very um, attractive dresses. He should be mostly very simple at heart, simple in his habits, living. And for him, the real attraction is the tilak, the kanthimala, the various symbols which remind one of Lord Krishna. So that should be the mood. Prabhupada is pointing in the purport. Then in the 15th verse, this prostitute has a husband. So who is that husband? So the Haryashvas understood that their husband is the living entity with impure intelligence. So the living entity has accepted this impure intelligence as the prostitute and he is her husband. One loses independence. So Kim Asat Karma Bhir Bhavet. What is the use of engaging in performing temporary fruitive activities? What will one benefit? So Prabhupada is saying that actually one who has uncontrolled intelligence, he is not Vyavasayatmika, but one who is actually having pure intelligence, he is Vyavasayatmika Buddhir, Eke Kuru Nandana. He is not many branched, he is focused, he knows, and therefore he can be happy. And in such way, we should understand what is the nature of this material world, how the activities of this material world are actually illusory in nature. So that Prabhupada is pointing out. That is how one should understand the husband of the prostitute, the conditioned living entity. Then in the next verse, the 16th is the river which flows in both directions. So this, the Haryashvas understood as material nature which creates and destroys. So it's creating and then destruction. So both are happening in this world. So that is how material nature functions in two ways, by creation and dissolution. One cannot get out as current or swifts at its bank. Generally, when there's a river in this material world, the current is swift in the center and in the banks, it is not so swift. It's slow. But this particular river which is flowing in two directions, the current is swifter on the banks. Why? Because the living entity, when banks represent his coming out of this material conditioning of repeated birth and death, when he tries to come out, it's much more difficult. The current is very swift on the banks, so it's very difficult for him to come out of. So what is the conclusion? There is no use of fruitive activities in that river. Kim asat karma bhir bhavit. So Prabhupada is pointing out what is the nature of this material world, which is actually governed by Durga, and Sthiti, Shrishti, Sthiti, Pralaya, how creation and dissolution are acting. She's in charge in this world on behalf of Lord Krishna. So one should be careful, not get carried away by the waves of this river of material nature. Then in the 17th verse, it's mentioned that there is a home. So what does this home represent? The 25 elements. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the cause of house of these 25 elements. Without knowing him, what is the use of fruitive activities? Kim asat karma bhir bhavet. So these 25 elements which are housed are actually, who is the proprietor? Lord. They are coming from, originating from the Supreme Personality of God. So one should understand that. Then only one can make progress. So Prabhupada is talking about Brahman realization, Paramatma, Bhagavan, how they are the realization of same absolute truth, different degrees. And by bhakti only one can come to the highest understanding of Bhagavan. Then in the 18th verse, the swan was mentioned. So what is this swan? How Harayash was understood? So one who discriminates between matter and spirit, bondage and liberation, described in Shastras. So this is like swan. So swan actually can discriminate. Like we know, the nature of swan is it can uh, take out milk from even water mixed with milk. So similarly, swan is one who discriminates between matter and spirit. What is actually sat? What is actually asat? What is bondage, which will bind? What is liberation, which is as per the description in Shastras. So there is no use of taking to temporary activities, giving up Shastras. Kim asat karma bhir bhavet. So that is the understanding which um, Harishwas have. So Prabhupada is putting it in current context that how the today's leaders, they are going for a sophisticated civilization without having much faith and understanding of Vedic understanding. If one gives up that, then one will not be able to make any progress or headway towards spiritual emancipation. Then in the next verse, 19th verse, there is a revolving object. And what does that represent? Which has got sharp spokes. It's the eternal time, which has very sharp blades, which goes on rotating uninterrupted. It is continuously moved without studying it. So if one does not see the effects of time, study it properly with spiritual understanding. Kim asat karma bhir bhavet. What can, how will one be able to come out from this asat karma, temporary fruitive activities? So the effect of time, Prabhupada is mentioning how, quoting from Chanakya Pandit, Ayusha Shana Eko api na labdhaya swarna koti bhi na chain nirattakam nitihi ka cha hanis tato adhika. That a moment of time cannot be brought or returned in exchange of millions of gold or millions of dollars. So if one loses time without any benefit, then what is, he has actually not gained anything. It's foolish. So therefore, time is very important and it passes very swiftly. One should be careful to utilize it. And then in the 20th verse, knowing actual purpose of the Father. So who is the Father? So um, Narad Muni was saying you should know the actual purpose of the father. So who is the father? Actually, father is the Shastras. And Prabhupada in the purport is pointing out actually the father we have of this material body, mother and father, but Shastras are actually the real father who are governing us, guiding us to our eternal destination. So Prabhupada is quoting that from Rishabh Dev's teachings. Uh, Pitana Sasya, Jananina Sasya, Namochayat. So if a father or mother cannot deliver one from uh, his subject or his son or his sibling, sorry, his children, Namochayat Samupeta Mrityum, from the cycle of birth and death, he should not become father or son. So actual father is the Shastras who is guiding us to take shelter of spiritual path, of spiritual master, and therefore engage in spiritual activities. So this is how the Hare Ashwas understood the allegory of Narad Muni, and they were really enlightened. So in 21st verse it mentions Hare Ashwas with same conclusion believed Narada's instructions and followed the path by which one will never return to this material world. So they understood, they circumambulated the great stage and followed that path which is not bringing them again back to this material world. So that is what uh, the expertise of spiritual master is. So Prabhupada is pointing out very beautifully in this purport, Daksha means who's expert. So Daksha is very expert in material affairs or sexual enjoyment or sexual progenation. But similarly, Narad Muni is very expert in spiritual emancipation. So even though material Daksha does not actually appreciate uh, the spiritual emancipation, but what to do? The spiritual master or a Vaishnava, he very expertly wants to deliver the living entities from this cycle of birth and death. So then it's mentioned in 22nd verse, Swara Brahmani Nirbhata Rishikesha Padambuje Akhandam Chittamavesha Lokan Anucharan Munihi. So it's mentioned that how Narad Muni plays musical notes in glorification of Krishna, fixes his mind at Lord's lotus feet and travels throughout the universe. So that is the mood of Narad Muni. Rishikesha Padam Bhoje Akhandam Chittam Avesha. Fully concentrating his mind on the lotus feet of Lord. Lokan Anucharan Muni. And he is traveling all over the planetary system. So that is the mood of Narad Muni. So Prabhupada is quoting this Bhaktivinoda Thakur song, Narada Muni Bajaya Vina Radhika Ramana Nam Nama Amani Uditahaya Bhakata Gita Sam. So how Narad Muni is constantly engaged in glorification of Lord, in uh, stringing his instrument, chanting the holy names of the Lord. And he's dancing in ecstasy with other devotees. He's drinking as if the Madhuri Pura beverage, etc. So that is the mood of Narad Muni and how he is actually delivering the conditioned souls, being Unmatta himself and passing that uh, intoxication to others. So that is the mood which is highlighted of Narad Muni, and that is how a devotee thinks. Manmana bhavamat. So that is the instruction of Krishna also. Madhyaji mam namaskuru mam evashyasi satyam te pratijani preyosi me. This is how Prabhupada is mentioning in the purport. Then after 22nd verse, the next section is from 23 to 35. So one set of sons are Haryashvas. So they are delivered or they are given the path towards perfection. Now Daksha is informed about this. It's mentioned in 23rd verse by Narad Muni himself, and he laments about their renunciation. He thought they were such good sons, they were obedient, humble, uh, but what to do? So then he was a little taken back and he felt a little lamentation. So then it's mentioned in 24th verse that Brahmaji comes and pacifies him, and then he begets another 1,000 sons, and they are called Shavalashvas. And in the same mood, he instructs them to go perform austerities before creating progenation. Go to the same place, Narayana Saras. Prabhupada very beautifully points out that Daksha was not feeling hesitant to send his second set of sons also, despite the risk that because of the instructions of Narada, they might become as intelligent as their older brothers. So Prabhupada is highlighting this fact that a dutiful father is one who does not hesitate to allow his sons to receive cultural instructions. Prabhupada is mentioning here cultural instructions concerning the perfection of life. He depended upon them to choose whether to return home back to Godhead or to rot in this material world. So what this is the father's duty, that he should make sure the children get cultural education and make them responsible. They understand what is spiritual emancipation all about, and then they can make their own choice whether to continue in this world or go back to Godhead. So, like that, it's mentioned here. And then Prabhupada in the end says the duty of father is to give his sons complete freedom to make his choice after becoming spiritually advanced by following the instructions of the spiritual master. So then in the 26th verse, they follow the path and they are bathing in holy water, they are cleansed of all their material desires, and they are also going undergoing severe austerities. So they are chanting Omkara. Prabhupada is mentioning there's no difference chanting of Hare Krishna and the Omkara. In the next verse, the 27th and 28th verse, it's mentioned that what are the austerities of Shavalashvas and the mantra they chanted. So 28th verse mentions the mantra Om Namo Narayana Purushaya Mahatmane Vishuddha Sattva Dishnaya Mahahamsaya Dhimahi. So this is the mantra they were chanting, and they were only subsiding on drinking water and ate only air. So that was the austerities they were performing. So Prabhupada is pointing out of the importance of austerities for devotees or for one who is wanting to progress in spiritual life. So Prabhupada is saying at least in this age, if one can follow the four principles, and that is tapasya. So tapasya is necessary. And by just bathing in holy rivers, one will get purified. Ganga, Yamuna. But one should perform tapasya. That is necessary for purification. And then in 29th verse, Narada speaks to Shavalashvas. Similar words he had spoken to their elder brothers. So it's mentioned that from 30 to 31st, Narada speaks to Shavalashvas. You are so they are saying that how Dakshayana Samashrunta Gadato Nigamam Mama Anvichatanupadavim Bhratrinam Bhratra Vatsalaha. So Narad Muni is telling you are affectionate to your elder brothers. So you should also follow their path. So he's first pointing out you have got such great, elder brothers who have shown a path of perfection. So you should also take inspiration from them and follow the path which has been uh, instructed by their behavior. So that first indication Narad Muni is telling how you should behave. And then in the next verse says, such pious brothers get the opportunity to associate with Maruts who are affectionate to brothers. So if you also follow their path, you will get a higher destination. You will be able to associate and enjoy with demigods like the Maruts. So you should follow your elder brother's path. Narada then leaves, following their brothers. Shavalas was engaged in also the process of bhakti and perfected their lives and also gave up their material uh, desires or propagation in this material world. They also take the path of Paramhamsas. So it's mentioned in 33rd verse. Sadrichinnam pratichinnam parasyanupatham gata nadyapite nivartante paschima yamanir iva. So taking correct part to attain the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which will induce his mercy, Shavalasvas never returned. Which is like knights, those have gone to west would never return. So once the night passes, gone towards the west, then that does not return. So that is how they also left for path of perfection. So then Daksha observed inauspicious signs and hears the news of his son's renunciation mentioned in 34, and 35 mentions that Daksha is very angry at Narad Muni and he fainted almost in lamentation. And when Daksha met with Narad Muni, he is very upset and he starts chastising Narad Muni for his duplicitous behavior, what he feels is duplicitous behavior. So the last section from 36 to 44 is how Daksha curses Narad. So 36 verse, Daksha tells, Aho asadu sadhuna, you are actually a sadhu, but you are dressed as a sadhu. Sadhu lingena nastvaya asadha akarya arbhakana bhikshur marga pradarshita. You have actually shown you are actually only wearing dress of sadhu, but you are a sadhu, imposter. I am sadhu in grahastha life, but you have shown what? Bhikshur marga, path of renunciation, pradarshita, to my children, which is very unjust. You have shown, so one may ask, what is injustice in this? So then Daksha tells in the next verse, what is injustice in this is that without having gained experience about the faults of this material world, you have just shown that the path without having proper understanding of it. So he says, you are sin personified. My sons are still indebted to saintly persons, to demigods, fathers. So they are rini, they are indebted, and you have unnecessarily, uh, right in the beginning, have asked them to leave, and you have made them come out of the path of fortune which they would have done. So then Prabhupada is quoting this Dev Rishi Bhuta Aptanenam Pitrinam, that one is relieved of all debts if one takes to path of devotional service wholehearted. So then carrying further, Daksha says you have unnecessarily created this mood of renunciation in innocent boys. And therefore you are shameless, devoid of compassion, and you are defaming Yashoha Nirapatrapa. You are actually defaming the Supreme Lord and his associates by your behavior. So Prabhupada is mentioning that that is the mood of one who is materially engrossed and he criticizes the devotees. But one should not be affected by it. Prabhupada is saying even we are facing this challenge when we are preaching to uh, people and their parents come and complain, why are you making them uh, devotees unnecessary? Then 39th he says, you are not Bhagavata who are supposed to be kind to conditioned souls. You break friendships and create enmity. Veram karam averinam. So you are creating enmity. You are not a friend to living entity because of your behavior. Why Daksha is feeling like that? Because his whole plan to create propagation of this universe has been foiled, which is actually with material consciousness. So therefore, he cannot accept the spiritual consciousness. Then 40th verse, full knowledge brings detachment, not just by changing dress. So he's saying, you are a sadhu, you have just changed dress. But unless one gains knowledge through experience, which brings about detachment, that is sustainable. But you have unnecessarily just asked them to change dress without having proper knowledge. So how will their vairagya sustain? But Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janete Asu Vairagyam Jnanam Chad Yad Ahetukam, as Prabhupada is mentioning in the purport from the first canto, second chapter. Just by taking to devotional service, it automatically brings out Vairagya and Jnana. Then in 41st verse, personal experience of misery of false happiness induces natural detachment. Minds changed by others can't be so renounced. So he's saying personal experience is the best teacher. This is what Daksha is saying. So they should have personally experienced misery in this world, and in that mood, when they renounce, it will be sustainable. But if just by hearing they take to renunciation, it will not last long. That is what Daksha feels. So Prabhupada is saying, according to philosophy of Daksha, a woman should first become pregnant and then experience the pain of childbirth. Then, if she is intelligent, she will not want to be pregnant again. Actually, however, this is not a fact. Sex enjoyment is so strong that a woman becomes pregnant and suffers, but she becomes pregnant again despite her experience. So it's not that just experience in itself is sufficient to bring about detachment, Prabhupada is saying, which is the philosophy which Daksha is propagating. Unless one has proper guidance and purified uh, heart, mind, then only one can actually bring about this transformation. Just mere experience will not help. So Prabhupada says it is not a fact that because material enjoyment involves so many failful conditions, one will automatically become detached. One needs the blessings of devotee like Narada. Then one can renounce his attachment. So unless there is blessings or intervention of pure devotee who creates that agyata sukriti or the mood of feelings of pure devotional service in the heart, which will induce renunciation. So he says further, you may be forgiven once for displeasing an honest grahavrata, like me who is engaged in vows of grahastha life without sinful act. I excused you once, so I've excused you in the first case, but you have done it again. You have again second set of sons also. You have uh, like not shown the right direction and unnecessarily they are young, and second time you have shown them wrong direction. So therefore, he says, you don't know how to behave toward others, and therefore I curse you. Tantu krintan tantu krintanayannastam abhadram acharapuna tasma lokeshu te muda na bhaved brahmata padam. So he says that how you don't know how to behave towards others. I curse you to travel all over the universe, but no residence anywhere. You will not be able to stay in one place for long. So, Prabhupada in the purport is saying that is a benediction for a preacher because he wants to constantly travel. He is known as Paribrajaka-charya. Constantly travels for the benefit of human society to preach the glories of God. So, rather than stay in one place, he wants to visit as many places and deliver the name of the Lord. Prabhupada says, even I have been cursed in the same manner, and therefore I cannot stay in one place for a long time, and therefore I travel from one temple to another, one city to another, and I have done the whole traveled whole around the globe so many times, and this is the curse which a preacher gets, which Daksha is given. But hearing these harsh words of Daksha, Narad Muni does not respond. Shri Shuka Uvacha Prati Jagrahatad Badham Narada Sadhu Sammata Etavan Sadhu Vado hi Titikshvara Swayam. So he is mentioned that he is Prati Grahatad Badham Narada Sadhu Sammata. Narada is Sadhu Sammata. He is Sadhu Vadu. He is Titikshava. He is tolerant. He does not protest or he does not do anything to counteract the curse or to curse back. He just accepts it. You have what you have said is good. Tad Badam and just moves on. So Prabhupada quotes this verse: Titikshava Karunika Suhida Sarvadehina Ajata Shatrava Shanta Sadhava Sadhu Bhushanam. So what is the Sadhu Bhushan? What are the ornaments? This Titikshava, Karuna, Suhida, Sarvadehina, Ajata Shatrava. So that is Tanadapi Suninchana, Prabhupada is saying. He is giving the example of Jesus Christ also. So, speaking or elaborating from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, says that after being insulted by Daksha, Narad Muni should have left immediately, but he purposefully stayed to hear all Daksha's strong words so that Daksha might be relieved of his anger. Prajapati Daksha was not an ordinary man. He had accumulated the results of many pious activities. Therefore, Narad Muni expected that after delivering his curse, Daksha, satisfied and freed from anger, would repent his misbehavior and thus get a chance to become a Vaishnava and be delivered. So, the whole intention of Narada in getting cursed was also to relieve Daksha from his anger, from his material mentality. So, that is the mood of a devotee. He does every action with the intention to help others make a progressive step towards Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada is giving example of Nityanand Prabhu being offended by Jaga and Madai. So this is how this chapter is concluded, where how Daksha curses Narad Muni is mentioned. Then the sixth chapter, which is entitled The Progeny of Daughters of Daksha. So after his failed attempts to create sons who will progenate, being requested by Brahma, he begot 60 daughters, it's mentioned, and how these daughters progenited, being married to various rishis and the other Prajapatis. So that is the main theme of this chapter. So from 4th verse to 43rd verse, there is the list of the names of daughters and their descendants, which is mentioned. So he gave daughters in charity to, there are 60 daughters. So 10 he gave to Dharmaraj, Yamraj, 13 to Kashyap Muni, 27, we know the constellation, 27 constellations to Moon God, 6, that is 2 each to Angira, Krishashva and Bhuta Rishis, and 4 to Kashyapa. So in total, these 60 daughters were married to these different personalities: Yamraj, Kashyapa, Moon God, Angira, Krishashva, and Kashyapa. And from them, the different species of living entities were propagated. That is mentioned from the 4th verse onwards to the 43rd verse. So, the species of aquatics, the species of birds, the species of all different living entities in this world was created. So, by these daughters of Daksha. So, in detail that can be read, but we'll go ahead. So, in the end of this discussion, Shukdev Goswami tells in the 44th, 45th verses that Rachana was daughter of Daityas, became the wife of Prajapati Twashta, and they got two sons, Sannivesha and Vishwaru. So Twashta had two sons, Sannivesha and Vishwaru, and although Vishwaru was coming from demons line, Daitya, demigods accepted him as spiritual master with the order of Brahma. When their spiritual master Brahaspati abandoned them. So this enticed Parikshit Maharaj to ask in the next chapter, please tell me about this. How come the Devtas offended their spiritual master, Brahaspati? So why did Brahaspati reject demigods? What was the offense the demigods made to their spiritual master? So that is what they asked, and in reply, the 7th chapter, Parikshit Maharaj starts answering, and that is where the whole Vritrasura pastime and how Indra gets the protection of the Lord, the theme is seen. So right at the beginning of the 7th chapter, the first verse, Parikshit Maharaj is asking this question of why Brahaspati, gave up his blessings and rejected the demigods. So to give that understanding, from 2nd to 8th verse, Shukdev Goswami tells the whole incident which led to this. So that once Indra was in assembly, sitting on throne, he was getting, he's like the king and he's getting respect, all the opulences, all the different gifts from all different corners. And then Brahaspati arrives at the scene. But Indra, for a moment, being puffed up, he did not get up to respect his spiritual master, Brahaspati. And Brahaspati could understand the heart of Indra. And understanding this, he just left because he was not offered a seat. Indra did not rise. Just the mentality in the heart of the student, the disciple, Brahaspati could see, and he saw a fault, and he saw now this would lead to his downfall, and he just left, did not do anything. So 9th verse, it's mentioned that what was the being very omniscient, being the spiritual master, he could understand what will be the nature. So in 9th verse, it's mentioned Tato Nirgatya Sahasa Kavir Angirasa Prabhu Ayayo Swagraham Tushnim Vidwan Srimada Vikriyam. So he could see into future, Brahaspati, and he could see that Indra is puffed up by material opulence, and he does not curse Indra, but he knew in future his own deed will affect him. So, and as soon as Brahaspati left, Indra recognized he had made a mistake. It was a momentary fall down, but he understood he had disrespected he condemned himself, but it was already late because Brahaspati had left understanding the heart or the nature of Indra. So then from 11th to 17th verse, Indra's lamentation is mentioned. It's mentioned that uh, um, first in the 11th verse, Indra actually starts cursing himself, saying that due to lack of intelligence and pride in material opulence, I insulted my spiritual master. 12th verse, he says, although in goodness I became proud due to wealth. So, this wealth, if it gets in the head, one gets very proud. And then he starts condemning such wealth. Who will want such wealth, which makes one become proud and become very disrespectful? So then he says, those who are condemned, those who don't know superior religious principles, are ignorant of them. They say that king on throne should not respect Brahmana. They say like that because they are not properly aware of spiritual religious principles. So then he gives an analogy that leaders who are ignorant, they mislead people on path of destruction. Like boarding the stone boat, it would sink with all its passengers. Why would one board a stone boat? One knows it will not be able to actually go or will float in the water. Definitely one who goes on that will sink. But that is the nature of those who are kupata. Tesham kupata dishtranam patatam tamasi yada ye shraddhayurvachasteva majanti ashma plavaiva ashma plava. So ignorant leaders mislead people to path of destruction. They say, "Oh, there is no need. You are so opulent. You have so much respect. Why should you respect others? There is no need to respect others. Why should you respect a brahmana? Why should you respect your guru? You have become so good. You have become so elevated. You don't need to respect others." It's like going on a boat which is made of stone. It will definitely sink. So Prabhupada is quoting because the boat analogy comes from 11th canto. Nar deham adyam sulabham sudurlabham plavam sukalpam guru karnadhara. So this boat of human birth. So who is the karnadhara? Who is actually the boatman? It's guru. So it's sudurlabham. But if one takes the guidance of karnadharam, then one can cross the ocean. Otherwise, he is doomed. So, in the end, Prabhupada is quoting Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Asma Ashmaya plavo yesham te yatha majjantam plavam anumajjanti tatheti rajaniti uddishteshu sasabheshu kopa vyanjita. If society is guided by political diplomacy, with one nation maneuvering against another, it will certainly sink like a stone boat. Political maneuvering and diplomacy will not save human society. People must take to Krishna consciousness to understand the aim of life. So it's just having political mindset, having diplomatic mood will not help unless one is Krishna conscious. So Krishna Chakravarti is mentioning that is like boarding a stone boat. So then in the 15th verse, I will touch his feet without duplicity and satisfy him. He is in mode of goodness and knowledgeable. He'll understand that I am repentful. He'll accept me. So this is the way I will try to beg forgiveness from my spiritual master. And in the 16th verse, Brahaspati, who understood Indra's mind, became invisible and left home. So Brahaspati actually could foresee, but he knew he needs to learn a lesson. So therefore he left home, he became invisible. 17th verse, Indra and demigods searched, but they couldn't find Brahaspati. So Indra starts lamenting, he has no peace. and he's surrounded by demigods. He knows that a great mistake has been done and he will have to reap very bad consequences. So, understanding, demons could understand that the Devta's strength position had declined. So 18 to 20th verse mentions how demons attack the demigods and Shukracharya guides them. They declare war against demigods. The demigods are severely injured by demons. They approach Brahmaji for shelter and instruction, and then Brahmaji pacifies them by his causeless mercy. Then 21 to 25, Brahmaji actually gives them good instructions on need to follow or actually please or abide by the orders of the spiritual master. So from 21 verse, he says, due to madness of material opulence, you have acted impudently towards Brahaspati, who is best of Brahmins. So you were mad with opulence. You thought, oh, I am so big, I am so rich, I am so opulent, I don't need to respect Brahaspati, and that is what has led to your fall down. So one should be always grateful, one should be always respectful to the Guru. Prabhupada is mentioning in the purport. Because of your misbehavior towards your spiritual master, you have been defeated by weak demons. So demons are weak, but your act of disregarding, of disrespecting your Guru Brahaspati has actually made you weaker than them. Just this act. Because where does the strength come from? Yasya prasada bhagavad prasada. Yasya aprasada na gati kuto. Because you have displeased your spiritual master, Brahaspati, therefore you have fallen from your position. Then in 23rd verse, all the weak demons gained their strength. Why? Because they have received power by worshipping their Guru, Shukracharya. So they have in turn gained power by worshipping Shukracharya, and you have lost power by disrespecting Brahaspati. So then Brahmaji tells, Tripishtapam kim ganayantya mantra bhrigunam anushikshitartha na vipra govinda gav ishwaranam bhavanti abhadrani nareshwaranam. So Brahmaji is telling that one becomes strong in one's position by first having determined faith in mercy of Brahmanas, cows, Supreme Lord, and also always worshipping these three. So one should have faith in them. These three, Vipra, Govinda, Gava. So the Brahmanas, the Lord himself, Govinda, and the cows should have faith, and he should also worship them. If one does that, then he gains strong position. So if you also do that, then you can gain a strong position. He is never defeated. One who has faith and worships these personalities. So then Brahmaji advises you accept Vishwaru, who is son of Twashta, as Guru, and please by your worship, he will fulfill your desires. Provided that you tolerate his inclination towards demons. So Brahmaji warns that you should tolerate the Shamishyadhvam Tasya Karma. Because he is coming in lineage of the demons, you should tolerate his inclination to demons. So understanding the guidance of Brahmaji, the demigods go and they start conversing. From 26 to 40th verse is mentioned they start conversing with Vishwarup. So demigods are relieved of anxiety. They went to Vishwarup, embraced him and spoke to him as follows. So 27 to 33rd verse, it's mentioned that they are trying to put forward their case. So they are first of all saying, we are on the level of your parents. So please try to fulfill our desire. The highest duty of son, even though having son, is to serve parents. What to speak of a brahmachari son? So generally, they are saying son's duty is to serve parents. We are on the level of your parents. You should serve us. So different personifications. Acharyas are Vedas. Father is Brahma. Brother is Indra. Mother is Earth. Sister Mercy. Guest is religious principles. Invited demigod Agni, and all living entities personify Lord Vishnu. So these are different personifications. If we are defeated by enemies, please relieve our distress through your austerities. So we know you have the proper means, you have the proper austerities to help us. So 32nd verse, they say, since you are aware of Lord, you can be spiritual master of all. We accept you as our guru and director. न घरयन्ति हि अर्थेषु य स्तंग्रि अभिवंदनम छंदोभ्यो अन्यत्र न ब्रह्मन् वयो जिष्टस्य कारणम. Because you are advanced in chanting Vedic mantras, you can become our priest without hesitation. Although you are our junior, so he may raise, I am junior, how can I accept priesthood? But they're saying you are advanced in chanting, so that is a qualification you have. So Vishwarup is pleased and he starts replying to demigods. Actually, I am like your disciple. You are commanders of the universe. And a true Brahmana does not accept a position of, mastership for some material benefits. He just does it out of Shilonchana. So like that, he accepts the position of the priesthood, and he composes Narayana Kavacha, which helps the Mahindra, Indra, and the demigods regain their lost kingdom. And he spoke the secret hymns that protected him and to conquer the demons. So that was the benefit or the benediction in the form of Narayan Kavacha, the secret hymns which Vishwarup gave to Indra and demigods, which helped them relieve them of their suffering and their current position. So in the next verse, then Parikshit Maharaj asks, please tell details about this Narayan Kavacha, etc. So that we'll take up next week. But today we started this discussion about how Narada got cursed because of Daksha's intolerance towards he delivering his two sets of sons, and then the progeny of Daksha, the 60 daughters, how they were married, and one of the progeny was Twashta, and Twashta's son was Vishwarup, and how this Vishwarup became the spiritual master after Indra and demigods offended Brahaspati, and in the process they were given Narayan Kavach when they accepted Vishwarup as their spiritual master. So this is how today's discussion ends, and we'll continue from the next chapter, the 8th chapter, the coming week. Anybody has any comments or questions? Yes, Shanta Vigraha Prabhu.
Prabhu. Like in just a small reflection I'd like to share. Here we see Indra, falling victim to pride, not respecting his spiritual master properly, and then a whole elaborate arrangement will be made for his purification through several different interactions. And we see that also Indra falls victim to different anarthas in the 10th canto in relation to Krishna and other places as well. I was reflecting on the special verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, Ete Chamsha Kala Pumsha Krishna Stu Bhagavan. So Indrari Vyakulam Lokam Mridayanti Yuge Yuge. That, it is not only when demons appear externally that Krishna appears and renders aid to Indra, but also when demons appear inside of Indra. in the form of pride and all these things. Then Krishna makes arrangements for his purification. You know, I was just reflecting on that in relation to my own self, that oftentimes the enemy is not outside of us, the enemy is within us. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, and actually this whole canto is Poshanam. So how Lord, even those who have in like devotees like Indra who have contaminated mindset, or they get afflicted by contamination, even to them Krishna gives his special protection, special mercy, Poshanam. So that is actually being highlighted through this episode. Krishna Chakra Thakur and Acharyas are mentioned. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay, so if no one else has any comments, we will conclude here. So thank you very much. Shrimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.